had always been a woman driven by desire, and when it came to Bill, her obsession reached levels that could only be described as desperate. For years, she had been fighting for his love, trying to maintain her place in his life. But the more she tried, the more she realized that she was losing ground. Bill had begun to distance himself, growing colder and more distant, and Dani knew that if she didn't act soon, she would lose him forever. But as the old saying goes, desperation breeds recklessness. And in her desperate need to reclaim Bill's heart, Dani devised a plan that she hoped would secure her place by his side once and for all. The plan, as twisted as it was, seemed perfect in her mind. She would fake a pregnancy. She would tell Bill that they were going to have a child together, knowing full well that he would feel obligated to stay with her, to marry her, to give their family the stability it needed. Bill had always been a man of honor, and Dani believed that this was the one thing she could use to her advantage. It was a gamble, yes, but she had nothing left to lose. So, without hesitation, she began the charade. She carefully crafted a story, making sure to drop hints at the right moments, to leave just enough doubt in Bill's mind that would make him question his own thoughts and desires. She knew that Bill wasn't a fool, but she also knew that his love for her was still there, buried beneath the surface, and all she had to do was bring it out again. At first, things seemed to be working in Dani's favor. Bill, who had been distant and detached, began to show signs of concern. He asked questions about her health, her well-being, and she played her part to perfection, telling him that she was just starting to feel the effects of her pregnancy. She'd never felt so alive, so in control. For the first time in what felt like forever, she had a piece of Bill's attention back. She was getting closer to her goal. But as the days passed, Dani began to notice that Bill wasn't as easily fooled as she had hoped. He didn't show the joy and excitement she had anticipated when he first heard the news. Instead, there was a subtle wariness in his eyes, a guardedness that made Dani uneasy. Bill, who had once been her biggest supporter, now seemed suspicious, as though he was slowly piecing together the truth. She tried to ignore the signs, convincing herself that she was just being paranoid, but deep down, she knew that the game was far from over. Bill's suspicions only grew with time, and he began to ask more pointed questions, his doubts creeping into their conversations like a slow poison. He wanted to know more details about her pregnancy, wanted to meet with her doctor, wanted to see proof of what she was telling him. Dani, whose lies had once come so easily to her, now found herself struggling to maintain the illusion. Every little detail seemed to unravel, and with each passing day, the fear of being exposed became more real. The cracks in her facade were widening, and she knew it was only a matter of time before Bill uncovered the truth. She could feel the weight of her own deception crushing her from the inside. But even as her world began to spiral, Dani refused to back down. She couldn't lose Bill. Not now. Not when she was so close to having everything she had ever wanted. She doubled down, continuing the charade with increasing intensity, desperate to convince him that their life together was not only possible but essential. But her desperation was becoming her undoing. Bill's suspicions were no longer just a quiet hum in the back of his mind. They had become a full-blown storm, and he began to scrutinize her every move. He started showing up at places where Dani said she would be, asking questions that cut too close to the heart of her lie. He even hired a private investigator to look into her claims, convinced that something was wrong. Dani could feel the walls closing in around her. The man she had once loved was now investigating her every move, and with each new discovery, her secret became harder to conceal. She was running out of time, and she knew that if she didn't come clean, she would lose everything: her relationship with Bill, her reputation, and perhaps even her own sense of self-worth. The pressure was unbearable. The lies she had told were starting to suffocate her, and every interaction with Bill felt like it might be the last. She had pushed him to the edge, and now he was ready to break. Dani found herself at a crossroads. She could keep up the ruse, hope that Bill would never find out, and risk losing him forever when the truth eventually came to light. Or she could come clean, admit her deception, and hoped that Bill would understand, would forgive her, and perhaps even give her a second chance. The problem, however, was that Dani wasn't sure if she even wanted forgiveness. Her obsession with Bill had blinded her to the reality of their relationship. The love she thought they had was now tainted by her own manipulation. She had poisoned everything that was good between them. And deep down, she feared that there might be no going back. But the hardest part for Dani was the realization that, in her pursuit of keeping Bill in her life, she had created a monster. She had become someone she no longer recognized. The woman who had once been confident, strong, and independent was now a shadow of her former self, consumed by a single desire to keep Bill by her side, no matter the cost. And the cost was high. Every time she lied, every time she manipulated him, she lost a piece of herself. She was losing her sense of who she was, and for what? A man who was beginning to see her for who she truly was. A man who would never forgive her if the truth came out. Dani knew that the day of reckoning was fast approaching. It wasn't just about Bill anymore. It was about her. She had to confront the person she had become, the lies she had told, and the reality of her situation. She couldn't continue living in this world of deception, not without losing herself completely. But would it be too late? Could she face the truth and rebuild her life? Or would the weight of her lies crush her before she had a chance to redeem herself? Dani's actions had placed her in a perilous situation. Her entire world was built on a lie, and with each passing moment, she could feel the foundation cracking beneath her feet. Her desperation to regain Bill's love had spiraled into something much darker, a manipulative game that she had lost control of. Bill was no longer the man she knew. He was a man on the edge, teetering between love and betrayal. The truth was closing in, and the question was no longer if it would come out, but when. Dani had to decide whether to face her lies and try to rebuild or to keep running, knowing that the truth would eventually shatter everything she had worked so hard to manipulate. The clock was ticking, and Dani's worst fear was looming. Bill would find out, and when he did, there would be no coming back. Dani's world came crashing down with the one simple request from Bill: a paternity test. She had never anticipated that her elaborate lie, the one she had so carefully constructed to bind Bill to her, would be threatened by a single, cold, logical demand. Dani had spent weeks crafting the perfect story, one that would not only convince Bill but also guarantee that he would stay with her, even if it meant manipulating the truth. The pregnancy had seemed like her last hope, a desperate attempt to secure Bill's love, to lock him into a future with her. But now, in a twist of cruel irony, the very thing that was supposed to keep them together was the catalyst for unraveling everything. When Bill asked for the test, Dani's heart sank. She had been hoping that Bill would embrace the idea of becoming a father and, even more so, that he would never question the pregnancy. But the truth, as it always does, had a way of clawing its way to the surface, no matter how deep the lie had been buried. Bill's doubts had been growing, of course, but Dani had tried so hard to dismiss them. Every little question, every little look of skepticism from Bill only pushed her further into the depths of her deception. But now, here at Waste's moment of reckoning. Bill's request for the paternity test sent a jolt of panic through her entire being. She was trapped in a corner of her own making, and the walls were closing in fast. She had hoped that Bill would trust her, that he would believe in their future together. But now she could see the suspicion in his eyes. He was no longer the man who would sweep her off her feet and fall for her charms. He was a man who had begun to see through her facade, and the cracks were growing wider with each passing day. In a panic, Dani scrambled for a way to cover her tracks, to make sure that her lies remained intact. She immediately fabricated a story, claiming that there had been a mix-up at the doctor's office. The results, she explained, must have been wrong, and she insisted that she had been told by the staff that they would send a corrected report soon. It was a flimsy story, but it was all she had left. Dani hoped that Bill, in his desperation to believe her, would let it slide. But Bill wasn't so easily swayed. His suspicions only grew stronger, and the more Dani protested, the more determined he became to get to the truth. He wasn't going to let her lie her way out of this one. Bill's demand for answers didn't just stop at questioning the test results. It became an obsession. Dani could feel the pressure mounting. He started asking more questions, showing up at places he knew she'd been, demanding to see her medical records. He even confronted the doctor, desperate for any scrap of information that would confirm his suspicions. Dani, who had once been in control of every situation, was now losing her grip on reality. The one thing she had tried so desperately to keep hidden truth about the fake pregnancy was slipping through her fingers. She could see Bill's resolve hardening, his determination becoming an unstoppable force. The more she tried to cover up the lie, the more he seemed to dig deeper, unraveling the story piece by piece. Dani's desperation reached a fever pitch. She knew that if Bill uncovered the truth, everything would be over. Not only would she lose him, but she would lose everything she had built her life on. The foundation of her entire existence would crumble, leaving her with nothing. In a last-ditch effort to keep the lie alive, Dani tried to manipulate the people around her, playing on their sympathies and trying to turn them against Bill. She spread rumors about his lack of faith in their relationship, painted him as someone who didn't believe in family or commitment. She even tried to manipulate her friends into siding with her, hoping that if she could gather enough support, Bill might reconsider his relentless pursuit of the truth. But the more Dani tried to control the narrative, the more the truth began to seep out. Her web of lies became too tangled to manage, and the consequences of her actions began to weigh on her like a ton of bricks. Bill, for his part, was unwavering in his quest for the truth. No amount of manipulation or excuses from Dani could shake his determination. The paternity test had become a symbol for him, not just of doubt, but of trust, whether or not he could trust Dani, whether he could trust their future together. He was no longer willing to let her manipulate him, and the more she fought to keep the lie intact, the more he became resolute in his decision to uncover the truth, no matter the cost. With every passing day, Dani's world grew smaller. She could feel the walls closing in around her, and it was becoming increasingly difficult to keep the truth from surfacing. But she wasn't going down without a fight. She continued to lie, continued to twist the narrative, hoping beyond hope that she could keep Bill in the dark. But it was becoming clear that the longer she dragged this out, the more it would cost her in the end. The stakes were higher than they had ever been, and Dani knew that if the truth came to light, it would destroy her. Bill, too, was caught in a web of his own making. He had invested so much emotional energy into their relationship, so much faith in the life they were supposed to build together, that he was unwilling to let go easily. The idea that Dani had betrayed him, that she had manipulated him in such a profound way, was a bitter pill to swallow. But even more than that, it was the betrayal of trust that stung the most. The lies had shattered something between them that could never be repaired. Bill's relentless pursuit of the truth eventually led to the final confrontation. Dani, knowing that she could no longer hide from the reality of the situation, found herself face to face with the one person she had spent so long deceiving. The moment was filled with unbearable tension as Bill laid out everything he had discovered. There was no room for denial, no way to cover up the truth anymore. The lies had caught up with her, and the inevitable had arrived. Bill demanded that Dani admit to everything, to confess her deception. He wasn't asking for excuses anymore. He was demanding answers. The weight of her own actions bore down on Dani as she stood there, unable to speak, her world crumbling before her eyes. She had manipulated him, used him, and for what? A lead that had grown too large to control. A desperate attempt to hold on to something that was slipping away. It was too late for explanations. Bill had already made up his mind. The battle between them had become a high-risk, high-stakes game that Dani was losing. The emotional toll of her lies, of her manipulations, had taken its toll. In the end, it wasn't just about the paternity test. It was about trust, about the betrayal of something so fragile and sacred. Bill could no longer trust Dani, and the foundation of their relationship had been irrevocably shattered. The truth had emerged from the shadows, and with it, The painful realization that Dani's deceit had not only destroyed her chance with Bill but had forever changed the course of both their lives. The game was over, and there was no coming back from the devastation.